Hey y'all, I'm Eboni K. Williams here, host and attorney extraordinaire. Welcome to Holding Court, where we analyze the very latest in legal headlines, the ones that got all the streets talking. You know what we do, we dig deep into how the courts impact the culture. We break it down, going straight from gavel to your news feed, and every week we keep it 100. Right, Dustin Ross?
That's right.
Dustin Ross, my love, we're going to get straight to it this episode. We're excited to get into some things that we know our jurors are passionate about, caring about, and curious about. We're going to start this docket with an update on a very sad story, but an important story, right, Dustin, that we've already covered here on Holding Court. Of course, we're talking about the death of young Caleb Wilson, just 20 years old, dying allegedly connected to hazing ritual activities. He was a student of Southern University, fantastic HBCU in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Allegedly, Caleb was participating in activities related to pledging the Omega Psi Phi chapter at the school, on the campus, and just so heartbreaking when we all saw that Caleb Wilson, at just 20 years old, is literally no longer with us, has lost his life, had his life taken, really. And we got to get into the why, because that's going to have severe legal consequences amongst others. So we're going to get into that. We did cover this story, of course, Dustin, when it initially was being reported that young Caleb passed, but now we've got some updates. Now we've got some arrests that have been made. We've got some moves on behalf of the university that we want to update y'all on. And we really want to talk. I'm going to just get on mine for a minute and just talk about, to me, what does the Divine Nine largely, broadly look like on undergraduate campuses moving forward? Because we gotta have a reconciliation point at this point, to me, Dustin, about this. And I'm going to be clear. Yes, I'm a proud member of the D9, and also I don't think you have to be a member of the D9 to have a take on this, to have an opinion about this, because if you are a black person in America, this is a part of your broader culture. These are our collective young people dying unnecessarily, and we got to have a family talk about it, as far as I'm concerned. Okay. Beyond that, y'all, on this docket, we're going to get into some of the Jay-Z of it all. A lot of y'all have seen a lot of headlines. We know at some point Jay-Z was accused alongside Sean Combs by the same claimant in that particular lawsuit of unsavory acts, and up into and including rape. That lawsuit against Sean Carter, at least, was dismissed. And now we have seen, as many of y'all were calling for and anticipating, Jay-Z suing that accuser. And we're going to get into the legal ins and outs of that lawsuit, of Jay-Z's lawsuit now against his now former accuser. All right, so let's get to it. Okay, again, you guys, so sad, but we got to get to the updates and have this family dialogue. Young Caleb Wilson, just 20 years old, died allegedly at the hands of participating in some rituals that were associated with him pledging the Omega Psi Phi fraternity. We now have an arrest. Caleb McCraw, also young, 23 years old, a current member of Omega Psi Phi fraternity. I say current member, not of the chapter per se, but in the fraternity at large, allegedly punched younger Caleb Wilson multiple times in the chest. Okay, this was being held in like a warehouse style facility off campus. Okay, and this was allegedly a part of the initiation and pledge process ritual. He was taking these chest punches, if you will. As a result of that, Caleb was then at some point taken to the hospital where he will ultimately succumb to his injuries, and he died. So now 23-year-old Caleb McCraw has been charged with both felony criminal hazing as well as manslaughter. Okay, both felony charges. At a press conference in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Police Chief Thomas Morse Jr. stated that Mr. Wilson, that's the victim, who died on February 27th, died as a direct result. Pay attention to that word, direct result of the hazing incident. So that's what the police chief is saying. That is the premise, y'all, in which 23-year-old Caleb McCraw has been charged with these felony accounts. Now, according to the police, it wasn't just one person. Those who know pretty much assume so. This was a group. A group of individuals dropped younger 20-year-old Caleb Wilson off at the hospital. Allegedly, that group of individuals, Dustin, lied to the hospital staff. They claimed that he had just randomly collapsed while playing basketball, and then they left before the authorities could arrive. But detectives later determined all of that to be a lie, all of it. In the police arrest report, it says that Mr. Wilson, the victim, and 8 others, so this would have been a group of 9 potential pledgees in the Omega Psi Phi fraternity, they were all struck by Mr. McCraw and at least 2 others, and that they were wearing boxing gloves when they were distributing these punches. The arrest affidavit also says that Mr. McCraw, that's the 23-year-old, allegedly hit Mr. Wilson, the 20-year-old, 4 times in the chest, after which the victim collapsed, suffered a seizure, and lost control of his bodily functions. No one present attempted to call for emergency assistance. I'm hearing some reporting, Dustin, that say the reason why that would be the case is because their cell phones were taken from them prior to, this ritual, allegedly, so that no one had a cell phone to call for emergency assistance. But again, this is, some reporting, cannot confirm it in its entirety yet.
Right.
We do know Caleb Wilson, at 20 years old, was pronounced dead at the hospital. The autopsy found no significant trauma to his body outside of a small bruise on the right side of his chest. One has to reasonably assume that is a result of that chest punching with the boxing gloves we talked about. Investigators also found no indication that Mr. McCraw intended to cause death or any great bodily harm to any of the pledges. That'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Not the death piece, but the intent to cause great bodily harm. Yeah, that's going to be interesting. Hey, jurors, Auntie E's here, and I need to cut in on this episode. As of the time of the recording, we gave you as much information as we had, but this news cycle is moving so fast, y'all. I'm talking about rapid, that there have been some really important legal updates to the case concerning the absolutely horrific death of Southern University student Caleb Wilson. And we are reporting on it as soon as possible. As much as we get information, we want to give it to you as soon as possible and in real time if we can. So, as of the recording, we had one suspect who had been arrested, 23-year-old Caleb McCraw. Went into details about that. We'll give you some more momentarily. Since then, we have had 2 other arrests. There are now a total of 3 suspects in custody related to the death of 20-year-old Caleb Wilson. So we got 23-year-old Caleb McCraw, which was taken into custody last week. McCraw turned himself in to East Baton Rouge Parish Police and has been held in the prison there, the local prison there in East Baton Rouge Parish. He turned himself in with his attorney. He had been charged with felony criminal hazing as well as manslaughter, both felonies. Keep in mind, his bail was originally set at $100,000. It was then reduced to $75,000, and he successfully bonded out of jail Friday of last week. Okay, so about 1 week ago. Since then, this is the update. Kyle Thurman, a 25-year-old undergraduate who attends Southern University right now, has been charged. Kyle Thurman, again, 25 years old, was arrested in Port Allen, Louisiana. It's very close to Baton Rouge. He was arrested by the U.S. Marshal Fugitive Task Force, as well as the local police department, Baton Rouge Police Department's Violent Crimes Apprehension Team. He was extradited back to Baton Rouge. He was booked in East Baton Rouge Parish Prison as well. So all 3 of these defendants right now are being held in the same facility. It is unclear whether or not Kyle Thurman, 25-year-old, had an attorney with him. We're not sure on that. We'll get more details soon. The third suspect, also in custody, Isaiah Smith. Isaiah Smith, 28 years old, currently a graduate student at Southern University. So all 3 of these defendants, suspects, if you will, are all current students. 2 undergrads, and then Isaiah Smith at 28 years old, enrolled in the graduate school at Southern University. He had been kind of at large for a period of time, a day or so. Isaiah Smith has now turned himself in. He turned himself in Tuesday of this week. He has been also booked and being held in East Baton Rouge Parish Prison. Okay, so now all three of them have turned themselves in and will be, going through this process. I want to let y'all know that the three suspects allegedly punched with boxing gloves. Okay, all 9 of these pledges, these pledges attempting to join Omega Psi Phi fraternity. All 3 of them punched some, I should say. Now it looks like they were split into a couple of groups. I'm talking about the 9 pledges. They were divided into certain groups amongst themselves, and apparently Smith punched some, Thurman punched others, and then McCraw is the one that they're saying specifically punched young Caleb Wilson, the young man who lost his life in this process. So that's according to the arrest warrants. That's where we're getting this information from. Again, McCraw is the only one specifically accused of punching the deceased, Caleb Wilson. Now, let's talk about the fact that Isaiah Smith is said to be the dean of pledges. And that means he was in charge of these 9 pledges at the time of the alleged hazing incident. Isaiah Smith is being charged with punching at least one of the other pledges during this incident. Now, at this point, so Isaiah Smith is being held currently on a bond of $25,000. And then I do want to talk about the fact that there's a difference, a pretty significant difference in the bond. Isaiah Smith is being held on this $25,000, and of course, what I just reported to y'all, Caleb McCraw, the one allegedly that punched the deceased Caleb Wilson, his bond was $100,000. His lawyer asked for a bond reduction of $75,000. He secured that, and he has been released. So why the big difference? That is because Isaiah Smith, as well as the other defendant, Thurman, that turned themselves in this week, they are not being charged with manslaughter. They are only being charged with the felony hazing. Okay, so that's why their bonds are significantly less money. McCraw, in my legal opinion, rightfully has a much higher bond because that manslaughter charge is a much more serious offense, quite obviously, which is the killing of another without the element of intent in that way. So, all very tragic, y'all. Very, very tragic. All of these we're talking about are students at Southern University, one graduate student, and really it was 3 undergraduates, including the young man, Caleb Wilson, that lost his life. Very unfortunate. We will keep y'all up to date as quickly as we can, as quickly as we get the information about the future ongoings, the legal developments, and the analysis of this tragic hazing case. Now, in Louisiana, this is a felony, the hazing, under what we call the Max Groover Act that was passed back in 2018. That was named for a Louisiana State LSU student who died of alcohol poisoning connected to a hazing incident to the Phi Delta Theta fraternity house. So under the act, if a person being hazed dies or is seriously injured, violators face up to a $10,000 fine and 5 years in prison. Organizations, representatives, and officers of an organization and educational institutions can also face penalties. So what is clear here is Omega Psi Phi itself, so we're talking about the entity, the organization nationally, Dustin, could face civil penalties under that act. That's a state act. And East Baton Rouge District Attorney Hiller Moore has indicated as such. So to continue here, the fraternity's campus chapter has been ordered to cease all activities, and students involved in Mr. Wilson's death could face expulsion from the university. This is coming straight from Southern University's president, Dennis Shields. Also, very important here, currently all campus Greek life organizations on Southern University's campus, all Greek life, anybody in the D9 has been barred from taking any action. So all additional members, everything through this entire academic year has been suspended, totally suspended. Will not, no intake, no nothing will be happening, no step shows, none of that. This is all done for the entire academic year at Southern University. Before I go further, when you saw the news of the arrest, how did this land for you, Dustin?
It's such a interesting place that I'm at emotionally, and just with this whole entire situation, right? First of all, it is unspeakably disgusting that this young man lost his life the way that he did, right? Full stop. He was killed.
Mm-hmm.
And that is very hard to swallow because he was such a young man with a lot of promise, a very promising future ahead of him, and nobody wants to read that headline.
Yeah.
The connection to D9 life, Greek life, you know what I'm saying? All of that is unsettling for me because we're at a time where black HBCUs,
Mm-hmm.
black fraternities, black academia overall is under attack. And
Yep.
so seeing this headline at this time is just very unsettling for me. I wish that young man, Caleb, who passed away, I wish him and his family all the peace and justice they deserve. And whoever is responsible for this, according to the police reporting, which we live in a day and age where how much faith can we put into that reporting, right? But according to the police reporting, there was people who are directly responsible for his death. When you start using legal jargon like intent to cause bodily harm, shit like that, when those terms and phrases start surfacing in the reporting connecting to this, you already know where this is going. And if that's what happened, then that is what needs to take place. Whoever is responsible for this needs to be held accountable and face the appropriate consequences. So it's just a sad fucking story to me. I feel bad for all the other students at Southern University who had ambitions of joining Greek organizations like that on campus and now cannot do it because of this. I just hate the pause that it put on, again, black academia overall at a time when they really need all the support they can get. So first and foremost, love and peace to his family and justice. I hope justice is served. And then there's a larger conversation that I think needs to be had about the responsibility of people in Greek organizations on campus right now, and how they need to be conducting themselves and how they need to be handling the business that needs to be handled to protect the sustainability of the organization and black Greek life overall. So it's just a lot of shit that this makes me think about and a lot of concerns that arise when I read this headline.
Absolutely. And I guess to start with just the emotional devastation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let me, and I'm gonna do it in a couple phases. I'm gonna start with the
Mm-hmm.
university. Let's start with Southern University. As you said, right now, Dustin, it's such a tender, vulnerable time for any HBCU in America, right? For all the reasons that
Mm-hmm.
we know, this damn Trump administration and its brazen attack against our HBCUs, both funding wise and rhetorically and culturally. They are under siege,
Mm-hmm.
literally. Southern's important to me. So this is actually quite personal for me, Dustin. What a lot of people may or may not know
Mm-hmm.
is that it is at Southern University's Law Center in Baton Rouge, also part of Southern University itself, is where I started my legal education. So I did
Mm-hmm.
my first year of law school at Southern University. So I am very familiar with that campus community. It is a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful campus community. I know a whole lot of my sorors from the Beta Psi chapter. Shout out to Beta Psi chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. I know quite a few lovely gentlemen from KA Psi on that campus. So,
Mm-hmm.
my point is I know this campus community personally, and it's a beautiful, important part of Black culture and Black community, and that campus community has suffered such loss and has been in such a state of grief for a lot of different reasons over the past several years.
Yeah.
Least we forget, just back in 2022, 3 students from Southern University's band were killed in a car wreck right before the semester started. That was so devastating. You had those 3 students, Tyron Williams, 19, Dylan Young, 21, and Broderick Moore, 19 years old, headed home for Christmas break, so not before the semester, but during Christmas break, all 3 killed in a fatal car collision. So the campus
Mm.
is, had that horrible thing happen. And now this. So to your point of just how sad and heavy this is for the
Right.
student and the faculty and the staff community at Southern, it can't be overstated.
Right.
Is the point we're making there. And then beyond that, let's go to the legal piece. So You talked about accountability, Dustin, and the reality is Caleb Wilson at 20 years old was killed. He didn't just die. He was killed. There was, it was a homicide of some sort, okay? Meaning one person or persons, potentially in this case, actions caused the death, were the proximate cause of death to another. That's why I flagged earlier when I talked about the police chief saying that the actions of the arrested individual were, quote, directly responsible for Caleb Wilson's death. That is something, that direct causation piece is very important.
Right.
Didn't say he intended him to die, but certainly those actions of putting on those boxing gloves and
Caused
punching
it
repeatedly up to 4 times in the chest caused it. That causation piece is going to be very important when and if this moves forward. Well, when it moves forward legally, because we know that it will. A lot of people rightfully were like, well, we know it wasn't just one person. So
Right.
what we're not about to sit up here and pretend like is that this is potentially the arrested individual, Caleb McCraw, is going to be seen as a scapegoat and take the legal fall, the L, for everybody else that contributed to Caleb Wilson's death. And that's correct. This is not justice if that were to be done. Justice requires, legal justice and kind of moral justice, right? Requires that all of the responsible parties, from all of the individuals that may have distributed those chest punches to young Caleb and the alleged other 8 individuals. And that's important too, because I don't think you should have to die to be protected this kind of violence. Like, you know what I mean?
At all. Yeah, that's literally what it needs to be avoided. Literally, is people dying from this shit.
There needs to be justice for the other young men who were a part of this process that lived to tell about it. Okay, so let's name that piece. And then, like I said, it can't just be Caleb McCraw, although he is currently charged with the felonies. Any other members of the fraternity or members of the campus community that were participating. And also, now we got to talk about the organizations themselves, both Southern University as well as Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. We read to y'all last episode when we did talk about this case, the statement from Omega Psi Phi. It was not admitting any liability, but it was acknowledging the death of Mr. Caleb Wilson.
Right.
But now that we've got more information, we know that this arrested individual was indeed a member of Omega Psi Phi. I don't expect us to hear from Omega Psi Phi anymore at this point, Dustin. Now we're talking about an active criminal case. It's probably in their best legal interest to say nothing, because now they're going to be navigating what I expect to be a very severe, very significant, relatively complicated civil legal action. They're going to be sued by the family of Caleb Wilson for sure. They may be sued by the families of the other young men who were participating alongside Caleb Wilson. As in most of these cases where we've seen these fraternities and sororities being sued for wrongful death or this type of severe injury, these cash payouts can be debilitating. We're talking about millions and millions of dollars. So that's not going to be on the horizon. That's going to be the civil piece. Southern University is likely going to be running up on a very similar civil litigation in the upwards of millions of dollars. Why?
For
People are
sure.
going to say, well, yeah, like, why? It's awful that this young man died, but why are they going to be, why is the university and why is the fraternity itself going to have to pay out? Because they have a duty of care, y'all. This is what this comes down to. The law says that the organization, the university, and the fraternity have, in this case, have a duty of care. They are responsible for the overall well-being, safety, and protection of those that encounter it. So while the president of Southern University or no officials from Southern University were likely in that garage on that fateful night where this young man, warehouse rather, where this young man lost his life, was killed, the president and leadership of Omega Psi Phi was not on site or present when this young man's life was taken away from him so senselessly. But they are vicariously responsible, the law said, for making sure that they are doing everything they can to make sure that exactly this type of deadly scenario does not happen. And the fact that it did happen, Dustin, the law presumes a breach.
Yep.
And doesn't even presume it. Let me not say that. The law will be utilized to determine if there was indeed a breach. That's the correct way for me to say that.
And this is the position they've put themselves in by punching people in the chest until they die.
Yeah.
And
allegedly.
that's the harsh reality, allegedly, right? That this is what has taken place. This is what is alleged to have taken place. And so there has to be a line. And I think that this is where like leadership in these organizations should be called to the carpet, right? Because there has to be a line. There has to. We know that hazing is a very real thing. It's something that people try to avoid speaking about. There is a shroud of protective secrecy that exists
which gets
within
people
Greek
killed,
life.
by the way.
Yeah, and so if you're going to have that much respect to the culture of these Greek-led organizations, but there has to be an intervention from leadership to be boots on the ground. You know what I mean? In these chapters of these fraternities and sororities, telling people, hey, this is how this can go and this is how this cannot go, and here's the line. And I know that exists, I'm sure, but there needs to be some sort of
No, let me stop you, Dustin.
Okay.
It doesn't exist, and that's the problem. We would like to think that it does. We would certainly like to think it does by now, right? First Greek letter organization, Alpha Phi Alpha 1906 establishment. We are now in 2025. I don't have the tally, but I know the tally is not one when it comes to how many black brothers and sisters are dead, how many more are seriously injured as a result of trying to demonstrate their commitment to serve and fellowship. And when I say it like that, I really think it needs to be pondered on a very deep level as to what the hell is going on here, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to take this position, and I'm just going to say it plainly, and many will disagree, and some maybe will agree. I believe at this point, Dustin Ross, all 9 D9 Greek letter organizations have forfeited the right to have and maintain any kind of initiation process outside of paperwork. That's where I'm at with it. And as a lot of people gonna cringe and oh no, sorry, and that's fine. Y'all can have a different take. But I'm here with it, and I'm gonna tell you why I'm here with it. It's not because I don't revere the significance of particular processes. I actually very much do. And I'm very much of the mindset, and always have been of the mindset, Dustin, that there is pledging and there is hazing.
Yeah.
And they are and should always be deemed differently.
Yes. Yep.
Some may know, many do know, that up until 1990, pledging was a legal activity on college campuses. It was above ground. You would literally look on a campus on any given day or time, and you would see the pledgees of the Ivy League Pledge Club or the young men, pledging Ka Psi or Omega Psi Phi, and, the various names of their pre-initiated groups.
Yeah.
They would be carrying their bricks. They would be carrying plants. They would be reciting information. You would actually be able to, as a just matriculating student or staff member or faculty member on campus, see them wearing certain colors. You could watch it in real time, in daylight, people participating in a visual known pledge process. And I wasn't here in 1990 in terms of participating in that. So I can't speak on the perfection of that model.
Right.
But I can say what I know for sure, because common sense tells me, is that once things literally go underground, once the lights are turned off, that is only when you increase the likelihood of problems and devastation, secrets and despair.
I agree. I don't think it's smart to suspend the Greek activity on the campus. I agree.
So because of that, I think that there's been tremendous work, Dustin. As I mentioned last time we talked about this, I know within my sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, but also beyond AKA, I think all of the D9 have worked on anti-hazing policies. They've all worked on workshops. When you go to the regional and national conferences, and even at the cluster and local level, there's been tremendous work. And I do think much improvement when it comes to this issue of hazing and making sure that we understand and we promote being a non-hazing organization.
Yes.
But here's the reality. People keep dying. People keep dying, though, Dustin. And I guess I'm like this with it. As much as I wish there was a line, I wish there was a line we could collectively agree upon, that we'll do this but not that. We'll go this far but not that far. I believe we have forfeited the right as a broader D9 coalition to make such determination.
Wow.
And,
okay.
or certainly not to act on it. I'm really at this place, Dustin. I'm going to tell you how I got to this place. I had to gut check myself because I didn't want to get to this place. I wanted to say, this is so horrible for this chapter of Omega Psi Phi. This is so horrible for this campus of Southern University. But let's just execute a consequence around this situation and move on as we had been proceeding before and hope that this is the last death. But here's the problem with hoping that this is the last death. Unless I am willing, this is how I'm holding myself accountable, Dustin. Unless I'm willing to say that my daughter Liberty could possibly stand in the posture of being the last death, unless I'm willing to put her on the chopping block, so to speak, and say, well, let's just keep doing what we've been doing, working on it, incrementally maybe improving it. And then, I guess, again, it begs the question, what's the number? How many dead Black kids are we okay with, or are we willing to accept if we're not okay with it? Are we willing to tolerate for the sake of our esteemed rituals and processes?
And the answer should be a resounding 0.
Correct. And unless I'm willing to say liberty can be considered in the number of how many we're willing to sacrifice for the sake of a process,
right?
Then fuck it then. So I'm gonna say let's just stick to the paperwork. And that's really where I'm at with it.
That's the only way to make sure that things are not done this way. That's the only way, is to just have a 0 tolerance policy completely. You're right.
And we've had a that's the issue though, Dustin. We have a 0 tolerance policy, but then there's also at times, not all the time, not even most of the time, but at times, because hazing and pledging both are illegal now in this way, you've got a situation where it's things are done outside, let's just say, of the kind of regimented or the official processes and official organization protocol, right? And I'll just tell you, what's happening is ultimately there is always this scale of legitimate membership status. I'm going to say it that way, right? And so as long as there exists an opportunity, right, to have a scale of who's more of a soror, who's more of a frat member, whose process avails them to more legitimacy than someone else's, I believe that children and young people will continue to die. That's what I believe. And you know why I believe that? Because that's what has happened. So yeah, I'm taking a hard stand, a controversial stand for some. For some others, they're going to say this is common fucking sense. I don't even know why we haven't moved on it yet. And some others are going to say this is really devastating to hear and really, shocking to their kind of understanding and comprehension of D9 culture at large. And I make space for all of those critiques, Dustin. But I'm on record as saying, as of 2025, with the most recent death of Caleb Wilson at 20 years old, just a little bit about Caleb, y'all. He was a member, also played trumpet, a member of Southern's worldwide famous band, Just Play as Super Bowl.
Yeah.
They literally just played at Super Bowl. Yeah. He played trumpet with the human jukebox, as they are known affectionately as. He also
Damn.
was a civil engineering major at Southern, a future engineer. Just a young man with everything in front of him. And he's
So
dead
much
now.
promise. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And was executing on that promise, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, for me, let's just let him be the last. Let's just let him be
Mm-hmm.
the last dead black child in the name of something that is so important and culturally relevant and significant in black culture, which are our esteemed black Greek letter organizations that exist for service and fellowship.
Yep.
Let's just do that. Take that in, jurors. Sure, we'll hear about what y'all think about it in the comments.
Yep. Or else we're
Um,
gonna paddle you.
you know what? Y'all don't pay Dustin no attention. Don't pay Dustin no attention. Okay. We're gonna wrap this episode up going out on some Jay-Z of it all. Y'all have seen, I'm sure by now, Jay-Z has filed suit himself. He is now in the complainant posture. In an affidavit filed just on March 5th, a private investigator named Charlotte Henderson has come out and says that she has met with the accuser, Jay-Z's accuser. Of course, we don't know the name. That's a Jane Doe. Back in late February in Alabama. So this private investigator is saying she actually met with the accuser face-to-face in Alabama. Jane Doe, the accuser, allegedly told Charlotte Henderson that she fabricated, made up her story against Jay-Z, of course, the boss over at Roc Nation, at the request of her attorney. We know now this is the very much talked about attorney, Tony Busby. So I want to be clear here, jurors, and I want to say this very carefully, so listen. As to the legitimate status of whether or not Tony Busby should even be practicing in this jurisdiction, it's an outstanding question, Dustin. There's a lot of conflicting reporting. I'm not going to take a position because I don't have the standing to do so. But ultimately, this will be decided by the bar and the leadership that gets to make that decision, whether or not Tony Busby is even legitimately eligible to practice in this, particularly we're talking about here, the Southern District, but broadly in New York and et cetera. So again, I'm not taking a position. I don't have enough information, nor am I positioned to take one. But just know, jurors, it is outstanding. So this notion of, oh, he's not even licensed to practice, it's outstanding. He would say that he is. There's entities that say he's not. At some point, I'm sure we will gain some clarity as to whether or not. But in this moment, as of this recording, it remains in conflict whether or not Tony Busby is rightfully has status to practice in this jurisdiction. Now, moving on from that, let's go back to the Jane Doe, the alleged victim here, the accuser, I should say. She stated, per this private investigator, that Tony Busby pushed her to implicate Sean Carter in the lawsuit. Because remember, that lawsuit, y'all, originally only included Sean Combs, okay? And this was of an alleged rape done to her in the year 2000. Now, the private investigator, Charlotte Henderson, also says that Jane Doe blatantly stated that Carter was present at the party, but that he was not involved in the sexual attack. This is what the investigator is saying. So she's saying that's the nature of the alleged victim recanting. Tony Busby reportedly knew this information, so allegedly knew that Sean Carter was there, but not actively involved in the sexual attack, but went forward anyway with the lawsuit to include Jay-Z as allegedly a part of the rape itself. Of course, we know that entire lawsuit has now been dismissed. This is very icky, y'all. Okay, the affidavit drew attention to various outlets who caught on to the inaccuracies present in Jane Doe's story as proof that there was no real case against Jay-Z. So people, even just in the journalistic world, were finding holes, finding inconsistencies, which of course would make the accuser, Jane Doe, not credible,
right?
Which works in favor of Jay-Z and and really Puff too. I think we need to name anybody that's accused in this particular case. So again, y'all, this is a lot follow. These facts get real complicated. So the private investigator, again, Charlotte Henderson, is saying that she is not working for Sean Carter's legal team. So that's just to preserve her credibility. That's why that's important. She's saying, I'm not being paid by Sean Carter. I'm not being paid by his legal team to clear his name or make her look bad. She's simply reporting the facts as she says she experienced them. So again, this is all on our docket today because Jay-Z has actually filed suit. He's filed a defamation claim against the Jane Doe, okay, saying that she voluntarily admitted to being pressured into making false claims, heavy on false claims, in what's being described as an evil conspiracy to extort money and damage Jay-Z's reputation. That is the premise of Jay-Z's current lawsuit against the accuser, the alleged victim, who we only know as Jane Doe. Jay-Z's defamation claim filed at a federal court in Alabama, okay? And again, it must be the case that this Jane Doe resides down there as like an Alabama resident, hence why she met with the private investigator in Alabama, and Jay-Z would file in federal court down there because you must bring the litigation, bring the legal action where there is appropriate jurisdiction. So here that would be Alabama. His claim also accuses the woman's lawyer, Tony Busby, and his co-counsel, a guy by the name of David Fortney, of orchestrating her lawsuit. So Jay-Z in this lawsuit is coming for all involved. The Jane Doe herself for lying, but also, and probably in a legal sense, most importantly, most significantly, Tony Busby and Dave Fortney. And if he's successful, Dustin, this will be important mainly because of the Tony Busby piece and a lesser extent David Fortney, because this will work to forever stain, if you will, any future litigation attempts from Tony Busby towards Jay-Z. If successful here in this defamation claim against, yes, the accuser, but mainly Tony Busby, this will be Jay-Z really kind of issuing a final nail in the coffin, rather, of the litigation from Tony Busby against Jay-Z.
Yeah, and deservingly so. I'm a person who I have a very strong feeling about false accusations of abuse and of any sort, right? So if you are a person who makes those false accusations to me, you should be subject to the same consequence of whatever that accusation was. You should be subject to that. And so I totally
you said
think
stoning.
that
you said a public stoning. Is that what you
public
said?
stoning, yeah, on Netflix, as a matter of fact, available for streaming to be consumed by all. So I think that that's exactly what he should do. Listen, when you're a person who is at risk of people making false accusations at you more than the average person, you need to have protections in place. And part of that looks like going after the people who made them in the first place. And like you said, staining their reputation and staining their name when it comes to future allegations and future cases that they may be connected to. And I think that should be. I think it's the same thing to me as police officers who've been investigated and convicted of certain crimes, that information being readily available. It's the same. It's akin to that. You know what I mean? It's just like how we don't believe nothing LaTasha Scott says, right? It's the same thing. We didn't see her lie so damn much, that we don't consider anything she says to be truthful. It's just like how after Tasha K was found guilty of defamation, now we look at the things that she says through another lens, right? There's an additional filter there of, is this truthful or not? So I think that that's necessary, and shout out to Jay-Z and his team for handling it that way.
Yeah, a lot of people called for this, and at this point, it really is the only logical conclusion. The only way false accusers, false accusations will cease to exist is if they're not only their cases are dismissed, but also they are basically subject to these type of retaliatory suits. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that in a legally just way.
Yep.
If you lie on me, you must face the consequences of that. And that, of course, we're using a lot of ifs, but if indeed that is the case here, if indeed this was all a setup to frame Jay-Z, if this was a conspiracy, as Jay-Z is alleging in his lawsuit, then indeed there must be a consequence, and it must be severe to what everything you said, Dustin, because what we know for sure is that these type of false accusations only make things much, 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 much worse for actual victims, because it feeds a narrative. And we know that the data says that the actuality of false claims, particularly when it comes to false claims of sexual assault and rape, are very few. But even one false conviction, because that's part of the creed that many of us believe in and take, Dustin, when we practice law, especially, like we believe in 100 guilty men going free, lest one innocent man be convicted of something he didn't commit. That's actually the proportionality. That shows how serious it is when you're talking about falsely accusing, falsely convicting someone who has done nothing.
Yeah, for
absolutely
sure.
Inappropriate, absolutely unconscionable to every sense of justice. So this is really what needs to happen more in these instances of false accusations. If indeed that's what's happening here, you must retaliate. You must, go through that extra step. And certainly Jay-Z has the pockets to do so, to beat them at their own game. You want to set me up, you want to use the law to falsely position me as some sexual predator, which I am not. Let me show you how it feels. Let me bring litigation against you now to jeopardize and indict your credibility and your positioning. And this is really what it looks like.
And I love looking at it. This is what he deserves. This is what anyone would deserve who does something like that. To me, that's fucked up. So good job, Jay-Z. So. Good job, Jay-Z. Yeah. Good job, Jay-Z's legal team. And more of this. You know what I mean? Take that next step and invest in it. You have to pay for all of this. Invest in that to put a stop to it. You know what I mean?
As like you said, Cardi B is another good example. Different facts, of course, but she's somebody who just stopping the behavior is not enough. You're going to actually pay. You're going to actually have a penalty. And speaking of penalty, in addition to, whatever Jay-Z may, get in his lawsuit if he's successful, Tony Busby, if indeed even a bit of this is true, and you are out here pressuring and suggesting and feeding lies to potential claimants, sir, you need to be disbarred 50,000 times over again. So in addition to, paying damages to Jay-Z for his reputation or what have you, no. You must be sanctioned by the bar. You need to be disbarred. You need to be the rotting example of what happens, because we as lawyers, Dustin, as you know, we are held to higher standards of truth telling, not lower, higher standards of conduct. So it's one thing for the accuser to lie, absolutely horrible, yes, but she's a layperson. But the lawyer to be a part of, let alone the catalyst for the, no. To me, that's when, definitely get your coins, Jay-Z. But I'm really much more invested in what the bar and the legal profession would do to a Tony Busby under that situation.
Yeah, because they need to be stopped in their tracks. So that's why.
And made an example of. And definitely made an example of. Because if people start feeling like in any real way, Dustin, that lawyers are out here doing this and are allowed to do it and live to tell about it, so to speak, professionally live to tell about it and see another day, it will erode the entire attempt that we have at a so-called justice system. The stakes could not be higher.
That's right.
So, all right, we'll keep y'all posted on the updates as it relates to Jay-Z's lawsuit against the accuser, as well as Tony Busby, the lawyer. We appreciate y'all. We appreciate y'all joining us. We're so happy to have this session of court here for y'all, and we'll be back next week, same time, same place, with more for you. And in the meantime, we want y'all to stay just hydrated, moisturized. It's time to go ahead and pull that sunscreen out, believe it or not.
It's bedtime.
Yeah, because even though it's not necessarily warm per se, those rays are coming down.
Tearing your ass up. You wondering why you looking like somebody hung you up and dried you out. That's
like
why.
A raisin. Yeah,
put your sunscreen on and drink some water. That's
SPF
right.
at least 30. At
least
30.
At least.
Black people, I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
Black
the SPF should be older than you. So if you over 30, so should your SPF. That should be too. Okay.
So Dustin said I need to leave that 30 alone and go get that 50.
It's time to pick that one up, E. We got to put that. You got a baby. So you got to get that baby sunscreen. What is it? The baby sunscreen be like 100. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it'd be 125 for Baby Liberty. That's fair. That's fair for a few different reasons. Okay, y'all. We're going to leave it right there. And what you want the people to do, Dustin?
Read your terms and conditions, please, y'all. And also I want the people to be aware of the fact that I love my job over here at Holding Court. That's all. So thank you.
Love it. Holding Court is produced by Uppity Productions. Host and executive producers here, Eboni K. Williams, yours truly, and the Dustin Ross. Executive producer in Dossie, McCraw. Our senior producer, Ashley Hobbs. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any and everywhere you get your podcast.